As you said, a court, district court in D.C. made a decision just over a month ago, and we did appeal to the Court of Appeals for a stay on the actual contracts. Both were denied. We respect those decisions, and we will regulate those markets as we can, as best we can. We are appealing the actual case on its merits. What we appealed for was a stay on the listing of the contracts and trading. That was refused, but we still are going to challenge the legal arguments on its merits, and we'll see what happens there. That will take some time. But in the meantime, we have registered entities, a number of them who are listing these contracts. We're going to monitor the markets. We're going to surveil the markets. We're going to do everything that we typically do with registrants, whether it's the brokers, the exchanges, the data that we collect. And my position hasn't changed. I've said this many times. The position of the commission has actually been pretty consistent for the better part of a decade, that we don't believe listing event contracts on political elections is legal. But while we have this ongoing legal challenge, we'll allow them, and we're going to do what we can to protect the integrity of the markets. As you mentioned in the beginning, this does pull us into being an election cop. Whether or not there's manipulation and fraud, remains to be seen. But we will monitor markets. We will take tips or any information we get from the general public, and we'll pursue any action as we do in any part of our markets.
Well, so Mr. Chairman, you've got a little problem here that you never asked for. And I wonder if you could put a finer point on your ability to detect fraud in this system and the powers or authorities that you and your agency has to combat them. How do you go about this?
Yeah, Joe, it's a good question. And, we have typical regulatory authorities over registrants. As I said, we get to register the exchanges and the brokers, the individuals. We get a sense of how they conduct their business, and we're able to ask questions and do examinations, collect data to monitor trading patterns. And I think really that gets to the heart of your question in terms of anomalous trading patterns, and seeing what the data gives us. So much of our enforcement program across the board in this space and traditional derivatives contracts is driven actually by information from the public and market participants. If they observe anomalies in trading or positions that may be skewed off of sort of a supply-demand price discovery. So we're going to treat these products in this current state we are right now as we would treat any other product. Obviously, with elections being the underlying reference here, it is new for us to examine, but we're going to use the same tools and the same expertise that we've brought to derivatives markets and commodity markets for decades. And, if we do see something or if we hear about something, we will pursue it. In the meantime, we'll continue to vigorously fight the case in court and see what the outcome is in the appellate court. We have seen a fair amount of members of Congress weigh in on this publicly. I have had a number of conversations too, and I think there's a little bit of consternation from some, not all, about what this means. And we've seen a broad listing of these contracts across just control of one body of the Congress, whether it's the House or the Senate. So these contracts will continue to grow, and we're going to have to monitor them closely. And as I said, and as you mentioned, this is not necessarily something I believe is within our authority or legal, but we will do the job given the court's decision.
Well, and of course, some people will have their bets proven right. Some won't. This election will have an outcome, and the future of the regulatory authority of the CFTC could be influenced by election outcomes, not just at the presidential level, but also what you were just speaking to, the congressional level. Whether or not you get to continue forward as CFTC chair, sir, do you expect any future chair will have the same struggles that you've had in regard to regulating crypto, for example, without guaranteed delineated authority given by Congress?
Yeah, I don't think anything's going to change for my successors, whenever and whoever they may be. The fact of the matter is a number of these tokens are commodities under current law, and the CFTC is a derivatives regulator. We don't regulate underlying cash markets, whether it's in the agricultural space, the energy space, or the financial space. And, this is technology, this is disruption, this is a new asset class. These things happen constantly over time. And I think it's just we're at an inflection point. And as you point out, Kaylee, I've been sort of ringing the bell for a number of years now because we've made observations as the CFTC, as chair myself, about a growing market, a market that's proven to be sustainable, a market that has continued interest from both retail investors and institutional investors. And when you have those ingredients, I think it's really important that we react from a policy perspective. So we're doing what we can with the tools that we have at the CFTC, which is enforcement authority over fraud and manipulation. But what we don't have over these underlying cash markets is the traditional regulatory tools that we bring to traditional derivatives markets. That's registration, that's surveillance, that's examination, that's governance requirements, that's financial resource requirements. All of these components that have made, in my view, American capital markets the best and the strongest in the world. We've seen a shift, I think, in the sentiment of Congress over the past, call it 12 months, certainly different than 2 or 3 years ago when I was first talking about this, and even 5 or 6 years ago when this first became an issue for the CFTC and I started having thoughts internally and discussing it. But I do think as we get into a new administration, a new president and a new Congress, I think there's going to be an appetite, given that sustainability of the asset class and the desire from a lot of retail and institutional investors to see a regulatory structure around crypto.